Hey, welcome to Skeptic Hangout, the place where we sit back, relax, and chit chat about intriguing and sometimes controversial topics through the lens of skepticism. We are Josh and Laura, and we have with us today guest host Puck, our favorite armchair philosopher and asker of many questions. We are going to be discussing feminism. So grab your English tea or double shot espresso with oat milk and honey and join us as we discuss a subject near and dear to my heart. Girl power. This is Skeptic Hangout, feminism.
I appreciate the optics of this, where we have two men are going to mansplain feminism to Laura. This is good. This you couldn't have chosen a better panel.
I love this also because I was so enthusiastic in the intro, and I don't even think all feminism is even good. I think that there's definitely forms of toxic feminism,
Ooh,
and I think that it's very, very easy to take any movement too far. And I think feminism is a good example of that. When you have things like anti-male feminism, right?
okay.
So yeah, this would be
There,
interesting.
like any ideology, there's extremes in the good and well, there might be extremes in the good, but there are definitely extremes in the bad for any ideology. And feminism is definitely one of those. I'd even say like my first idea of feminism, I'd say is almost slightly toxic now. And I learned about feminism from Married with Children from Marcy Darcy. And I don't agree with a lot of the things that she was putting forth in that show. But again, that show is very patriarchal. I guess very much in the patriarchy, or you're almost supposed to be worshiping Al Bundy and no ma'am and
Yeah.
like looking down on feminism. So it's kind of it kind of makes sense why they'd make a toxic version of feminism with Marcy when it's written very much for a male audience. Just look at Christina Applegate's outfits, which I'm not slut shaming her, she looked fantastic, but it definitely seemed to be towards a male audience, so they give an extreme version of feminism that seemed to look down on women like Christina Applegate dressing too sexy, and like seemed like you had to be prudish in order to be a feminist, and you couldn't like they would look down on like strippers in that show. There's nothing wrong with being a stripper, but then there is a people don't seem to understand that there's also problem with you can enjoy strippers without objectifying them
Objectifying them. Yeah,
completely. Like there's still people.
I like how right off the bat we're going to the negative aspects of feminism because I think with any sort of movement or topic, it's really easy to get caught up in the like, well, here's what they're trying to do, here's the positive aspects of it, like feminism is good across the board, yada yada yada. But to be able to see sort of a darker side or to see some of the problems or limitations of it, is really good. I do think that you're right that like it can be hyperbolized and that actually can have a negative impact on positive feminism, like it trying to create equality for women and make this world a safer place for women. There is a point where to hyperbolize it too much does it kind of casts women like progressiveness towards women in a negative light. Like, oh, they're all just a bunch of man hating lesbian, blah, 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 blah. Not that there's any problem with man hating or being a lesbian, right? But there's like these like let's over hyperbolize this movement to the point where it's actually kind of counterproductive.
Well,
So
I
and I
think it
don't
was almost displayed prudishly. Like women are just like they need to be in the workplace, but they need to dress conservatively and stuff like that. Is how I used to get it. I definitely younger me definitely kind of leaned towards the red pill side and had like a bad version of feminism that I hated. Like I even saw YouTube videos that just focused on the extremes of it. Or there was a type of feminism where they were saying you're not a feminist unless you force yourself to be a lesbian, because if you're sucking dick, you're not a feminist. But I think women, I want to encourage all the feminists listening to this to suck dick if you want to. So, because there's no, I don't think it's against feminism to do that. I could be the wrong person endorsing that. But I think lately feminism seems to be pro sexuality and like pro sex work and pro using your body. It's almost like a sign of strength. And like maybe it's because I'm a pervert, but I also don't objectify those women, and I understand there's some strength behind it myself. And I that's the kind of feminism I can get behind it. Strong women using their bodies if they want. I also don't see a problem with women dressing how conservatively if they want, or prudishly if they want. Feminism to me, as a guy, and I'll explain this. I hope this isn't going over your head, Laura. Feminism to me
Ouchie.
is women just like doing what they want and not being judged for it.
I would
Yeah.
love a definition. I would love a more firm definition too, because like one of the biggest problems that I have with modern feminism is I really have no idea what we're going for here, right? Like older feminist movements, they had a specific purpose, right? Women want the right to vote. Okay, that makes sense as a movement. Women want equality in the workplace. That makes sense as a movement. What are we looking at now? Like there's a group of feminists who are saying that Instagram should not be banning women's bodies because women's bodies are just as natural as men's bodies. Hashtag free the nipple. Those are feminists. Then there's another group of feminists who are saying, you know what, no, we need to protect women, and we need to say,
Cover
you
up
know,
the
that
nipple.
that
Yeah.
they can be they can be easily manipulated, and this is or exploited. This is one of the ways to do it. So in order to protect women, we need to hashtag hide the nipple.
Yeah.
Both of them have women's interests in mind, but not so much to the point where you could say they're the same movement. So what do we even mean when we say feminism?
Here's the problem with that, right? If you just see feminism as an overarching movement toward women's rights, and it's that vague, right? Then you're going to get some women saying, well, our rights should look like X. And then other women are like, well, our rights should look like Z. And then other women are like, oh, no, 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 no. Let me tell you what our rights should look like, right? It's our right to stay home and take care of our children. And it's our right to tend to our husbands. And that's, I mean, honestly, like, depending on the woman, you're going to get a different definition of women's rights. And that's the problem with I think most movements, because I even see that within the LGBT communities, that you will have different people have different ideas. So that's why you have the thing like not gay enough, or you're not really bi if, or whatever. And that can be a real serious problem no matter the community that you're in, where individuals within that community have a set of standards within that community that the other individuals may or may not agree to, but that they're holding other people to. And where I think feminism is getting it wrong is those little cliques. What I think feminism should be from a female perspective, not that you guys care about that kind of shit or anything like that, is it should be women being able to make their own choice in how they express themselves and how they use their bodies. So it's not a matter of should women be able to have to get paid as a sex worker, right? It should be, does that individual woman want to get paid as a sex worker? That is the question that should be asked. And if 100% of them say no, then no, we shouldn't have sex workers, right? That's exploitation, that's slavery, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But if 99% of them say yes, then help that 1% that doesn't want to be there, get them the fuck out of there and let that 99% be. 48% want to show the nipple and 52% don't, then let the 48% show the nipple, and the 52% just needs to get used to seeing other women's nipples. Like
that's kind of where I fall on it. Is I always saw feminism as going for equal rights, but that doesn't mean that everybody's necessarily fighting for the same rights within the movement.
Right.
But I'm not going to call like the ones that say you got to go lesbian to be a feminist. I'm not going to say that they're not feminists, but I don't think you can lump all feminist movements into like one box. I think as long as they're moving towards equal rights in through whatever means they think is right, I'm going to say that they're a feminist, even if, although they might not identify with feminists, because I know guys that agree with that and they won't take up the feminist label. I generally agree with most feminist talking points. Oh, a lot of feminist talking points. There's too many to say most. I agree with a lot of feminist talking points, but I would never call myself a feminist because it sounds too many times I hear guys using that. I'm like, they just want to get laid. They're just like, they're just trying to get some points, a pat on the back for calling themselves a feminist.
It's like the conversation we had about an allyship, right? For LGBT ally, like the community can say you're an ally, but for you to take on the name yourself and be like, I'm an ally, you may or may not be seen as an ally by certain.
Exactly. I'm trying to be an ally to feminists, or even women that would fucking hate me. I'm trying to be an ally to them.
So I would push back on one thing you say, and then Puck, I promise I will let you speak. When you say like, if a group calls themselves a feminist group, you're not going to disagree that they're feminist or not. like if they're pushing this agenda and other feminist groups are pushing another agenda, I think we should be able to have a nuanced discussion of, is that group actually forwarding female rights, the right of choice, the right. So if you have a feminist group that says all females should be lesbians, down with a dick, that is not a feminist group, if you ask me, because that's taking away, that's putting an expectation onto other women who are not yourself and telling them this is how it ought to be or this is how you ought to feel. It's the same thing as saying like, well, women should be able to work in the workforce, instead saying women should work in the workforce and women shouldn't stay home and take care of their kids. I choose to. I homeschool my kids and I'm very capable in the workforce. I keep a part-time job and I'm very, very capable of being a professional and making money. And if I wanted to go back to being full-time, I could in a heartbeat. But I choose to stay home. I also choose to be bisexual, not lesbian, right? Like I choose the dick, right? Like that's my choice. So if you have a feminist group that's saying women, you should be this or you should do that, and that's part of the feminist movement, I would at least say that those arguments aren't feminist arguments or those positions aren't feminist positions. I wouldn't say they're not a feminist group. I wouldn't say they're not doing anything towards feminism, but I would push back on those and say you're working against now. You're working against women's rights, women's freedoms, women equality. Does that make sense?
I almost want to pull the no true Scotsman thing on that. I'm not sure entirely if that works in that argument, but I don't think, as long as they think that they're fighting for women's rights, whether or not they're misguided or not, I think you can't take away the feminist label from them if they ascribe it to themselves. I could definitely say that they're going about it the wrong way, which you kind of alluded to at the end, or like they're doing it wrong. But I definitely wouldn't take away the feminist label. I just say that they're misguided.
I'm thinking maybe it needs a different label because like the feminism of for example gender abolitionists would look very different from girl power feminism. So even though they fall under the same general like categorical umbrella of social movements, they definitely have different aims within them. So I almost think that it's more that we need to be more specific about which particular social movement we're talking about, rather than just apply one umbrella term to it. But you know what? You said you wanted to hear from me more. No, because this is the Puck Listens episode. Okay, this is the one where I have meta questions, and I understand that I'm looking at it through a weird detached academic lens, and that is not the I need to learn more from lived experiences instead of just being able to clinically study it. So this is the Puck Listens, and afterwards I will explain to you why, because there's a method to the madness here.
Well, so in that respect, we should all be, it should be Puck, Laura, and Josh listens, right? Because we should all be in that place of clinical or scholarly curiosity, learning about it versus spouting. I'm certainly not someone who calls herself a feminist in terms of activism, but you're damn sure that I'm all about women having like A, equal social standing, B, autonomy to their body and choice over what they do, right? Like we should have just as many freedoms, if not men. I do understand that biologically we are different. So I do understand that equity might be a better word than equality, but for all intents and purposes, in terms of what we should and shouldn't be allowed to do socially, absolutely equality is a better word. It should be, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And that includes the nipple. Dude, if they can wear their shirts off at the beach, I don't have any shame in women's breasts in terms of them having to be covered up. That's my own personal opinion. But I don't know enough about feminism in terms of a movement to be able to speak really knowledgeably on, well, here's the feminist movements, here's how they're all different, here's when they were, here's where this one came about, here's what this one stands for. Josh has already shown that he knows more about them than I do because he's already talked about a few.
Well, I listen to a lot of feminist podcasts, or at least
Nice.
like movie podcasts with feminist hosts to try to get that perspective. So I'm trying to learn. I definitely sound like a jackass, misogynistic asshole. That's more comedy than actual actions. And I am hoping actions speak louder than words, although I have a pretty big mouth. So we might be wrong on that.
And then I'm on the side that I don't even know what such actions look like. For example, like at the place of work that I'm at, um I tend to, like, in all my adult life, I tend to work in mostly female dominated workspaces. This is no exception. In a crew of about 30 people, there's only 3 men. That's it. And one of those men is in leadership. Of all the people in leadership in my organization, 7 are women, 1 is man. That's it. And so when I think about feminism and equality, yeah, this is about the time when people start bringing out that picture of kids standing on boxes to look over a fence, right?
Mhm.
Where, like, what's my role in this? Let's say that a woman and I are in line for the same promotion at work. Everything else is equal. We've been there for about the same amount of time. We come in with the same amount of outside experience. Like, all other things considered equal, is it more responsible of me to say, you know what? In the name of equality for women everywhere, since historically they still have a lot of catching up to do, the right thing for me to do is to pass up this promotion so that so that a woman gets promoted up? Or is it more a sense of, no, you know what, everything is considered equal here, and if anything's going to make us stand out, then it should be a pure meritocracy, and the fact that she is a woman should not be a determining factor in whether or not she gets this promotion?
I don't
I
think
don't know which one I go on.
I don't think you would have to bow. I think that'd be a morally virtuous thing to do. But I would think the employer who's actually given the promotion should take that into consideration, though, because if there are more men in the corporation that have been moved ahead, and you are at all means equal, like in talent, you are hired at the same time, you're both just as good at the job. I do think the employer is morally obligated to give the position to the woman, but I don't think you should have to take yourself out of the running, and just because there are inequities, because you should still be looking out for yourself. That's where the power dynamic comes in hand, where the employer definitely should be taking this stuff into consideration. But I don't think equal employees should be taking this into consideration as much, because you still have a family to feed. Why would you take yourself out of the consideration and get less money when you still have a chance at this?
So now
So
this
I
is where
should
it
put
gets.
myself, oh, sorry, go, please.
No, if you have something on this specific thing, because mine, I'll just
Well,
advance it to a different.
it just sounded a little like like, if both people got their way, then in that scenario, it seems like I should apply for the job, but I shouldn't get the job.
Well, that's up to the employer, honestly.
Okay.
But I don't think that's up to you to take yourself out of the running. But the employer definitely should be hiring the woman in that situation.
So here's where I'm gonna get a little bit controversial. I want to be very, very nuanced to be careful here. Especially as the woman, I definitely don't want to misrepresent and present myself as having any sort of like disdain for women or disdain for women's rights. I don't like the idea of anyone getting hired just because of their now, and I have to qualify this with some nuances. So just because of their gender or sex or ethnicity or religion, or just for diversity purposes, like you two are both equal, but this person is this demographic and we need more of this demographic, so we're going to hire you. There has to be eventually down the road, when we get our shit figured out and when we're able to look at people more equally, it should come down to even just a hair breadth of merit one over the other, whether it's experience, whether it's personality, and being able to blend into the work environment like better, or whatever the case may be.
Well,
However, I do know that if there's a business where it's predominantly male and women are trying to break into it and they're having a difficult time, and males are getting hired over them even with equal merit, that is where, and Josh did say that that is where, yes, more of those females need to get hired. But there needs to come to a point, and it's I'm trying to stand up on a pedestal for women here. It might not sound like it. It might sound like I'm a woman hater. It needs to come to a point where you don't get a position just based on the fact that you're a female. You get a position based on the fact that you are the highest qualified person. The
and
problem becomes when men have perceptions of women in the workplace that they are not the most qualified person, right? And that is why we have an issue in the first place. So what we have to actually battle isn't forcing employer, which you have to start with that because people are jackasses, like forcing employers to hire more equally, hire more people of color, hire different ethnicities, hire different genders, hire different ages, right? We have to say that to people because people are dicks. But if you could create a culture at a business where men do not see men as being automatically more qualified than women just because they're men, more women would get hired just based on their merit, and you have a more equal or at least equitable chance of having women in there without having to. So that I think is the ideal. So I guess what I'm trying to say is what we should ideally being attacking while we're attacking this whole no, you need to hire the woman over the man, we should be attacking the mentality that got us there in the first place, because that's where the real change happens.
Well, like
Does
the
that make
example
sense?
that we gave was completely impossible, where there's no time where two people are going to come in exactly equal at a
Right.
job. Somebody's always going to be a little bit better than the other.
Yeah.
And in that impossible situation where everything was exactly equal except for the gender, that's when I say we would hire the woman over the man, because of the inequity that's been happening there. But as soon as you're putting it in the real world, these people were hired at the same time, but the guy happens to be better at the job. You
Right.
put the guy ahead because that's just the way things work if you want a thriving business. But yeah, like you said, perception is wrong. And I don't think everybody knows how to get their cognitive biases out of their head. So like you
Right.
might need to lean a little bit more towards women or other genders instead of just men, because you can't take into account your own biases. But you can't hire, you still shouldn't be like, if she's completely inept or they're completely inept, don't hire them over the guy. But
Yeah.
if they're good at their job and maybe you think the guy's just a little bit better, you might want to still hire the woman up or the other gender up, just because you can't keep track of where your biases are. Maybe maybe they actually are better at the job than the guy is, and you just haven't thought of that yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a huge cultural shift that needs to happen, that I think is happening, as a matter of fact. And I think it's happening pretty widespread, but I do think that there's still a long way to go. I would be more insulted to hear you got the job that he was more qualified for because you're a woman than I would
It,
be to hear, hey, you didn't get the job because this guy is more qualified than you.
in
Right.
none
And
of the
so
scenarios did I
that,
say it was because they were a woman, though.
right.
That was just like a final tack. Every single scenario I put up, the woman's still qualified.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying is we as a culture still need to shift our perspectives quite a bit to the point where a person's gender just doesn't really enter into it one way or the other, right? It's really so then there's two things that I think still need to be combated. One is getting people qualified that are of different genders, that are of different races and ethnicities, right? That are of different abilities, right? It's amazing what people with disabilities can actually do. You just got to figure out what it is that they can and can't do, and you got to allow them to capitalize on their strengths, right? And so we need to get people trained to the point where they are competitive. And so getting women into colleges or training programs or whatever alongside men. And I do think this is happening, maybe not as quickly as we want and maybe not with the numbers that we want, but I think it's happening. I'm in the military, and the numbers for ethnicities besides white and the numbers of females is still less than white males, but females are growing in numbers in the military, right? And it's a matter of getting them in, getting the training, and making sure they're given the opportunity to progress and to excel. That's the one. And then the second one is changing the mentality of business owners and like supervisors, managers, that kind of thing. And I don't that they're both tougher than they sound, but I think that second one is even tougher. Changing someone's mind is way harder than training someone to do a job.
I don't see like currently the people in charge tend to skew on the older side, and this is gonna be me sounding ageist, but I do think that they had their old mentality on how women should be treated in the workplace, and they might be able to skew a little bit more to the left or a little bit more towards equality. But I'd say it's much harder to get somebody so set in their ways to change their mindset. I think that this is going to be a change in the workforce that we're seeing. Generations millennials and younger, I think, are where we're going to be seeing this kind of change happen. And that's why I'm definitely trying not to be that guy, because I'm 35 now. I'm heading into, I'm probably by some young person's idea an older person. I still feel like I'm young though, but I definitely trying not to be that old cranky guy saying the younger generation sucks, because the younger generation may have like styles and shit that I don't give a fuck about, but I don't care about what was cool when I was in high school either. But they're generally more socially conscious. So this is like every generation's coming up more socially conscious, and that's where the
Yeah.
change is going to happen. I think, unfortunately, that doesn't do a whole lot for you or other women in the workforce right now.
But I also think we should, and I'm gonna let Puck talk after this because I know he said he's gonna be a listener in this, but I do want to get at least his thoughts on what we've said so far. But I do think that one thing that we need to do better when it comes to all social movements is acknowledge progress where it's happening. And so I don't want to paint this doom and gloom. Like I actually want to paint the opposite picture. We have come a long way. I'm 21 years in the military, about to retire, and I have never experienced what I thought was a negative action or a lack of progress based on my gender. I'm retiring at a high rank. I've had a lot of opportunities and I've had a really, really good career. I think I got there based on my merit and my hard work. I don't think I had to struggle because I was a woman. And that shows the progress. And now there are people in the military, women who do experience sexism and do experience that glass wall. And it really comes down to things like your unit or your group or the individual supervising you. So there are still individuals in workplaces and individuals in organizations that are dicks that don't get it, right? And that's where, like you say, they're going to eventually, number wise, proportion wise, they're going to eventually age out. And then the upcoming generation just has so much fewer of them that we're not going to see it as much, maybe even if at all. But I do want to take just a quick second to say that like feminism and the actions of really, really early feminists have come a long way to where I don't have even a fraction of the problems as a woman that women 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago have had. And so that kind of bears mentioning as we're talking about where we're going is acknowledging how far we've come.
That's a good point because I tend to be a pessimist. So I'm going with all this negativity and how hard women have it today, despite the fact that I'm not really experiencing it myself. Like Puck, I work in primarily women inherited places. Working in an office with like I'd say 95% of the people there are women, but somehow yeah, I mostly see the misogyny online now, and maybe occasionally if I go out I'll hear from my friends, or like I see it on dating apps. My female friends show me the kind of messages they get on dating apps, like, oh, misogyny is still alive and well.
Yeah, oh
But
yeah.
my experience in the workplace is women seem to be doing okay, but I know that I'm going from a very small section of the workplace. I'm also in Southern California, so like maybe that also taints it. If you go to someplace else in the world, or even in America, you might see a little bit more misogyny than what I've seen.
My one
Yeah.
contribution to that is to remember that societies exist in different scales, right? So I can look at my specific workplace and the company that I work for, and if I trace up my organization chart all the way up to the owner, it goes woman, woman, man, woman, 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 owner of the company was a man, right? So it looks like there's a lot of representation all the way up, and I love the company I work for doing that. And it would be a mistake for me to say my workplace is like this, therefore other workplaces are probably like this also. There are probably entire professions out there that are still old boys clubs, where it's you say change the culture of the workplace. Well, that could take generations, right?
Yeah.
And so it's great that this new generation is coming in there, and probably the best thing that I can do is make sure that they have the space to do so. I'm a
There
big
also has to be
proponent
the
of go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I'm a big proponent of the idea of having, because I heard everybody give their ages, so now I know I'm the oldest person on the panel. I am a huge proponent of having mentors who are much younger than me, who are teaching me about the social movements and who are teaching me about what culture is like. Like last week was Puck learns Gen Z slang, so I've been saying no cap all week.
Have you learned Pog yet?
Bet, yes.
Yeah, bet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally king. But it's important to me to do that because I know that I want to help them get to the movement that they want, to get that workplace, because it's probably going to benefit me too. I mean, I'm not going to be in the workplace as long as they are, just by age attrition, but let me know what I can do to help.
And we are seeing that we're generations back, maybe you might not see a office like what me and Puck, or I don't know, I don't think Puck works in an office, I could be wrong, but you wouldn't see places like where I work or where Puck works, where there are women in places of power, and that's like generational things that's happening. And like, yeah, you aren't seeing it with the really older generations. They're kind of discarded off because of honestly, there are exceptions. There are like I've seen elderly people that are really into like social movements, and then it doesn't matter like they're 90 and they still care about the younger generations that are coming in
Right.
after them. There are exceptions. I know I definitely paint too broad a brush on that, and I almost always come off ageist. And I definitely, if we have any older listeners, you're probably one of the good people. But it's more younger generations are going to perpetuate this and move this movement. I think we're going to always look back at I think it was 2016, and like that's going to be the line where it's the way people were before Me Too and after Me Too, because Me Too was when we first started to see like even people in power that were rich coming down for that kind of misogyny. And like even my workplace, which is predominantly female, had talks around sexism and stuff after that, because it's something that needs to be talked about now. Even if it was just like all the women in the room are just looking at me like, Josh, are you paying attention to this? Don't be a misogynistic dick. Because now people are being held accountable for it, and that's gonna, as long as we can keep holding that up, all the younger generations are gonna continue to take this in. And I do see, despite the fact that I definitely am pessimistic for the most part, I do see progress happening on that level. But I do worry about the people in power right now fucking that up for everybody else for a little while, until these younger generations can finally get themselves into positions of power.
Not to bring the topic kicking and screaming into religion, because I got kind of flagged for not doing it last time.
You
But
got
how much
shamed.
of this might have to do with, like, how much of feminism and the movement that we want has more to do with breaking the idea that people were designed for a purpose?
Not just that people were designed for a purpose, that women were designed
Right.
for a
Okay.
purpose that
I
was
should have said
very
that better.
specifically subjugated
Yeah.
beneath men. Yeah.
Right.
I think, yes, feminism is trying to deprogram the idea, but feminism is necessary because that idea is trying to program, or that ideology is trying to program men and women into thinking that that is how they have to be. And when you have not only men convinced that this is how women should be, and then they're exercising their dominance over women in such a way, you also have women who think that this is how they're supposed to be, and they're subjugating themselves, right? And so I think honestly, yes, feminism is counterbalancing that idea, but I think that the reason why feminism is necessary is because that idea is counterbalancing like they that ideology, Christian specifically, will go into um, cultures that are more equal in terms of male and female rights, and they will start establishing male female gender roles, and they'll start changing their concepts of sex and changing their concepts of families and women's duties and men's duties. And I think that's what happened to us, to our ancestors, and we're having to deprogram. So it's yes, we're there's a system that's working against us to tell us that things have to be a certain way, and then we are countering that system with another message saying no, that's not how things are supposed to be. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
I think I have an idea, but this is where feminism actually helps guys out too, because the way that the roles were set up from like biblical standpoints is everybody had a certain role, and like a guy could never be a stay-at-home dad under those kinds of rules. But with feminism, you can actually have a woman in the workplace and the guy staying at home with the kids if that's what works for the
Right.
family. That's fighting for the rights of both of them by going for equality. So like feminism helps both sides of the coin out, because I've heard from most of the feminists that I listen to in podcasts that it's not just about women's rights, it's about equality. It takes on the feminist name because of women are definitely the ones that are depowered the most, or have the least amount of power. But ultimately it's about having equality among them for a good portion of feminists. I definitely would say that there's some that want to have guys were in charge long enough. Now the women get their shot. But I'd say for the most part, I see feminism as about equality, and it helps both people to escape roles that maybe they weren't ready for or weren't made for. Like some guys don't want to be like the breadwinner and can be okay with making less money than the woman they're with. And biblically, just making less money than you, or not, I don't know biblically, I'm not a Bible person, but I know a lot of Bible thumpers that would say it's emasculating having your wife make more money than you, when I
Yeah,
would see
and
that
that's
as like
culture
a
as well.
plus. Good on her. I
Yeah.
bring in as much money as you can.
So not just does feminism help break male, it almost has to too, right? Like we're trying to break female gender roles that automatically almost breaks male gender roles. And I think that's really, really awesome. But I think even more importantly, well, maybe not more importantly, maybe equally as important, because I don't want to necessarily like set them up one over the other, but mental health. Like I think feminism really does a lot towards acknowledging mental health for men too. Like if you talk about the systems that say women have to act a certain way, they're the same systems that say men don't cry, men don't feel feelings, men are the strong ones, men are the leaders of the family, and they're the ones that set the example, and they can't show weakness. Men have to be tough, right? And all these things. And so it leads to toxic masculinity, but it also just leads to really broken men who feel deficient or feel like, oh, because I have issues or emotions, I can't show those. That's girly. I can't act like a girl. I can't act like a, so feminism does a lot towards equalizing that emotions, that pain, that suffering, mental health applies equally to both genders, and that it's just as important for men to see mental health as an important issue as women.
Yeah, and that's a good stigma to break, because if I got upset about every woman that was tougher than me, I'd never stop crying. There's way too many that I know that are stronger or tougher than me.
The point that I was trying to make is that it's okay for you to cry, but I mean, you
Yeah,
don't
but
gotta
I
cry.
gotta,
You don't gotta cry because we're tougher than you. I mean,
yeah,
that's a silly thing to cry
yeah,
about.
that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm okay with women being tougher than me, but I guess I'd be in like a toxic spiral of I'm crying over women being tougher than me, but I can't stop. But I'm not supposed to be crying right now. So yeah, you made a good point there.
So we're coming to the very, very end of our episode here, and we just have a few more minutes. The one thing that we had talked about before the episode that we didn't even touch on during this episode, and I was like, oh, we're gonna open with this. This is great, right? We're gonna have tons to say on this, is mansplaining. And so I know,
Wait, let me take
Josh,
this from here, Laura.
yeah, no, you're gonna shut your mouth,
Mansplaining.
you little man. We're gonna no. Um, so this is I want to touch on this really quick because we originally had different concepts of what mansplaining was. We even had Richard put into chat like the philosophical or whatever, like
I
definition
think
of
he got it from like
mansplaining.
an old book, which is
It's like a
outdated
text
because
a
words change too often to
the
be going off of books. I
yeah.
Googled it and found the current definition, which was just talking. Pay attention, Laura. Was just
Sorry, what?
talking. I hope everybody realizes that I'm
I don't,
friends with Laura and I
yeah,
respect
no.
her, and I have not, I don't mean any of this attitude, but it's basically just like talking down on a woman, and usually it's explaining something that they already kind of know, like they don't know any better.
It's in
Like
a patronizing or condescending sort of way.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I see this all the time. I'm a metalhead, and I see like anytime a woman brings up that she likes metal, you almost start quizzing her on it, and then like you'll explain the genre before you even ask them what their likes are. Like, don't be that kind of person. You can ask them what they like. Don't just explain to them what metal is when they say that they're a metal fan.
Yeah,
So
this
Puck, what
this
is
this
yeah,
is everywhere in girl gamer communities.
yes.
Yeah, so it's still prevalent where women are just as capable and just as good gamers as men are, but trying to find esports teams, like high end esports with women in it, that's more difficult still. And trying to get into the competitive scene, I've heard women say that they still have problems being treated the way they are, and being talked to, and like you see that on Twitch all the time, where there's women who are playing group games like COD or Dead by Daylight or whatever, even
Mhm.
just casually, and then they are being told how to play the game. But if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see a list of achievements and accomplishments that woman has in gaming that they far exceed mine. I'm not even about to say anything, but it's just hysterical thinking that it's the thinking that I'm a man in this sphere. Therefore, regardless of your achievements, regardless of your accomplishments and credentials, I still have something I can teach you.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you how it's done. Or
Right.
like what Josh says, I'm gonna question your knowledge on it just based on the fact that you're a woman versus a man.
Mhm.
The only problem I have with making it its own thing, because I do think it's a problem and I do think that it should be addressed. But then I have to also stop and think, like, do women womansplain? Like, I, as a woman, I'm very smart and I know that I'm smart, but I don't always know everything. I don't always have the answers, but sometimes I think I do. And I have caught myself doing that exact same thing multiple times where I walk in and start explaining something to somebody as though they don't know, or I'm patronizing, or I'm condescending. I think that women do it too. I think we need to call a spade, whether it's the male doing it or the female doing it. We need to acknowledge that both genders do it. When it
I,
becomes a
I
problem is when it's specifically condescending or when it happens more often to women. I don't know. You guys need to tell me.
I'm
Does it-
I'm gonna push back with you on this. And I think the power dynamic makes a huge difference on why you go and call it mansplaining, because men generally have more power in a lot of situations. Where if a woman is explaining something, there isn't as much of that power dynamic, and it's not as condescending as the whole. And I don't think like you would do that kind of explaining to people regardless of their gender, because you just have a big head. That's
'Cause I'm
not
just
being that's
egotistical. Yeah.
yeah, that's not it. If I'm explaining it, if I'm talking down on somebody because they're a woman, that's me mansplaining.
That's
A
what I was
lot of
trying to
people,
get at, is the subtlety. Like, where is the subtlety? Yeah.
and
Because we need to acknowledge that both people can be patronizing and condescending no matter what. When it becomes
yes, they
mansplaining
can,
is when
Laura.
there's a
They can be really
they
condescending.
can even interrupt people like I just did to you. Yeah. That's what I was trying to get at. I was just kind of fumbling with my words there, is that when you have that power dynamic, is that's the word I was looking for.
So I
Okay,
know
so
I know we're getting close to wrap up time. Can I tell you guys about the experiment that I've been running on you for the past 3 hours?
yeah, you know what?
Sure.
Let's make that let's close out with that. Yeah.
Okay, so this actually ties in directly to addressing our biases when it comes to women in the workplace. Because I read this study about when men and women both feel like they've had an equal opportunity in a conversation, right? And according to this study, even when a woman only speaks about a third of the time, the men in that group still feels like the women had the majority of the conversation. So the
Interesting.
percentage of how much a woman is involved in a conversation seems to be one of those things that's skewed. So I intentionally for this episode wanted to sit back more, and that stopped at the beginning of this monologue, by the way. So don't count this
I'm
time
sure
when you
your
do this.
perception was still that Josh talked way more than me, no matter how much I talked,
So,
because
well, I want to
I
see what
saw
it looked
you
like on my
talking.
end. I consciously wanted to talk less during this. I even said that explicitly at the
yeah.
beginning of the episode. I want to see if it actually worked. Did I, even with putting conscious thought to it, give more space to you?
Or did you just give more
Or
space
did
to
I
Josh?
not think about what, or did it not work? So I'm actually kind of curious if my bias and trying to adjust for my bias worked or even failed more spectacularly. So
I
it
don't know.
would
So
be
I would
very
have a
interesting. What I'm going to do after this episode, when this episode airs, I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to compare the amount of time that we were talking to the past two episodes to see if even a conscious decision on my part made any difference.
So my question then would be whether it's you, me, and Josh talking, you, or me and Josh talking and you stepping back. I perceive that I take over a lot of the conversation, but then I also perceive when I think about it, like there are times when I'm doing editing where I'm like, wow, Richard talked a lot during that episode. I thought I did. Wow, Josh talked a lot during that episode. I thought I did. Right. So I'm also wondering what the personal perceptions are, or what your perceptions are. Do you guys think that me, as the female on this show, do you guys think that I take ample airtime? And then should we test that? Should we put that to the test? Should we like sample a few episodes and see how much airtime
I
I actually, because I
absolutely think we
perceive that
should
I
test
talk
that.
a lot on
we're
this
we're
show.
we're skeptics, right? This is what we do. We don't let
Yeah,
our feelings talk about it. We look at the data, which is why I
yeah.
would like, and so I can only
So
look at the episodes I had anything to do with. So I'll just look back at this one and the other two that I was on, and I would actually like to see that comparison. Who talked how much? Like this would
huh,
be a, let's just do the control right now, because obviously none of us are looking at any data or stats at all, right?
right.
And so the default then would be each of us took a third of the time. That's, with three people, we'd think everybody took a third. What do we think it will actually be after we do the math?
I think it's gonna be Laura took up probably the majority of the time, but I don't think it's because of anything other than the fact that Laura is probably the most intelligent person here.
No,
I'm
the
a
most
little bit
talkative.
quicker in with like dumb trying to be witty things, and then you came in more introspective. So I think it's definitely going to be Laura, not by a huge amount, but I think she's definitely going to be more than me, and then you, because you took yourself out. Although I'd say throughout the other 2 episodes, I still think I edged you out just a tiny bit.
Okay, Laura, what's your hypothesis here? What do you think the
So-
split will be?
I think it's going to be more even between Josh and I than, because I perceive that I talk a lot, but I also perceive that Josh talks a lot. And so what happens is we will get into like these long diatribes where each individual will talk for an extended period, and that can really throw off our perceptions of how much each person's talking. So like if you, for example, only talked once or twice, but you extended out that conversation for a length of time, it feels like you talked more even if you talked less. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I probably talked more, especially on this episode, than the other 2 of you. I talk quite a bit. Yeah. It would be hard for me to imagine that I talk less than
But
someone
we
else.
value
But
your voice.
And for fairness, since you're the main host, we're not going to include the intro or the outro because that's your
yeah, that would be
responsibility.
unfair.
That's
Yeah,
we're
just
looking at just the
conversation-wise.
conversational time, and only prior to me telling what the experiment was, because now that we know what it is, we're tainted. So it would
Now
only
we're
be
all aware and we're
yeah.
all
So that's time that I'm counting, and I'm going to take the work off of you. So I'm just going to wait till these episodes air, and then I'm going to actually count up the time from the YouTube video, and we'll figure this out. I believe my guess is the actual is that I'm going to say between me and Josh, we probably spoke more than our share of 2/3.
You mean us together?
The
I
2 of
guess?
us together took more than 2/3 of the total talk time. And then we get to figure out, is this a matter of Laura being a gracious host or
absolutely.
because of our actual misconception of how much space we give to each other? So it'll be a fun experiment. Like, I genuinely don't
Interesting.
know. I genuinely
And I
don't
would
know
ask that you also like post the
results.
no, don't just post the results, but post
Oh.
the original study that like spurred on this question for you.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I'd never heard of anything like that. So I think it'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So that leaves us with closing out. I would say for the audience, what are your guys' thoughts on feminism? Where is it going? Where has it come from? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on progress versus is feminism in some ways taking some steps backwards? Are they overcompensating? Are we hitting the nail on the head? What do you guys think? I learned in this episode that it's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more color to it than just simply women like fighting for their rights. So get on to Facebook and let us know what you guys think. In the meantime, Josh and Puck, do you guys have any quick closing thoughts?
This has
No.
been a I want to
I was
do
just
more
kidding. You
shows
guys be
with
quiet. You're men. I was joking.
Keep going, Puck.
Okay, but do you really have any closing thoughts?
Just that I wish I could do more of these with you. That doesn't feel like we give any of these topics enough time.
No, I agree with it. Except for this one. This one probably too much time.
And on that note, all right, that's it. Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you guys next time. In the meantime, keep questioning.
Interrogate your beliefs.
Stay skeptical.
Bye.